Hi everyone and welcome back. This video is titled Man Who Was Mocked by Brothers Over Inheriting Old Car Gets Last Laugh. That sounds wild. His brothers kicked him from their home, and from his dad's multi-million-dollar fortune, he only received a derelict car collecting dust in the garage. He had no clue what his late dad had in mind. When Tommy got the news about his dad's passing, he was heartbroken. The following weeks morphed into one painful blur, but it would only get worse. His dad had been his best friend, biggest supporter, and mentor. He taught him everything that Tommy knew and had promised he'd never leave Tommy's side. But when that phone call came, Tommy knew his life would never be the same. As kids, we never imagine that our parents will no longer be with us one day. Even though we accept this possibility as we get older, most of us will admit that the entire premise is frightening. For Tommy Hawthorne, losing his dad was more than losing a parent. But what came after would leave him in even more tears. How could his dad do this to him? Tommy and his three brothers grew up without a mom. His dad, a wealthy novelist living in England, had raised them all by himself, giving them everything they wanted in their lives. Although his dad never verbally admitted it, he'd always held a soft spot in his heart for Tommy, the last born. This was because of a very endearing fact. Tommy was his dad's favorite because his mom had passed away while delivering him. Tommy's dad always said he was the last gift his wife gave him before the next world called her. Before we continue, if you like this video, please like or subscribe. We'd greatly appreciate it. Now back to the video. As such, he peppered Tommy with love and affection, sometimes garnering whines from Tommy's other siblings. So when the man died, Tommy couldn't understand why he'd left him a scrap of a car while his brothers got heaps of money and their home. Tommy was the only one to read his way to college among his siblings. His brothers had dropped out of high school, choosing a life of pomp and splendor instead. Since their dad was rich, they never lacked anything they wanted. Each had sleek cars and a bevy of women streaming in and out of their apartments each week. But this would soon change. Tommy was a year from finalizing his master's degree in creative writing when his dad passed away. The news came as a shock, and Tommy never recovered even weeks after laying his dad to rest. His mind only snapped back to reality when the family lawyer gathered his brothers and him to read his dad's will. He'd expected to get some cash to cover his last year of education and maybe the house, but his dad had left him close to nothing. Tommy's dad gave heaps of his fortune to his brothers, the house included. To Tommy, he left an old derelict of a car that had gathered dust in the garage. The car, a Shelby Cobra, had been in the garage for decades, given that all of Tommy's brothers found it there when they were old enough to notice it. Its paint was chipped, the frame covered in rust, and most of its interior missing. So why would Tommy's dad leave him such a thing? Tommy's brothers had expressed their distaste for him for the longest while. Now that the house was in their name and they had 99% of their dad's fortune, they kicked Tommy out, calling a tow truck to help him move his junk out of their garage. If Tommy had been heartbroken when he learned of his dad's passing, now he was furious. He couldn't understand why his dad would give away everything and leave him with such a wreck. Tommy scoffed each time he remembered his dad claiming he was his favorite. But as the tow truck dumped the derelict car onto a hired garage, he decided to at least look at it to make sure he wasn't missing anything. Tommy searched the car's glove compartment, fishing out an old letter that made his brows furrow. He ripped it open, wiping his tears before reading. The letter was a few years old, judging from its date. It was also written in his dad's hand. It detailed how much Tommy's dad loved him and his brothers. But it also relayed fears over his brothers' future because of their dangerous lifestyle. The letter stated that Tommy's dad had left him $60,000 sealed in the car's trunk. He wanted him to fix the car and take it to a private auction in London. Tommy scratched his head while reading, but he knew he'd have to do this for his dad. Tommy deferred from school and hired experts to work on the car. Months flew by, with his brothers coming to the motel room he lived in to mock him. But he never cursed them out, only welcomed them with a cup of coffee and returned to work. He'd also divided the $60,000 his dad left him between school fees, the car repairs, and the transport money he'd need to take it to London. 2 years later, it was finally done. One look at it, and Tommy knew what his dad had been thinking. Tommy cleared his motel room and found a transporter truck to get him and his car to London. His brothers had long stopped visiting, and each time he went over to see them, they'd chase him away. They'd sent dogs after him one time and even called the police on occasion. It was clear that they wanted nothing to do with him even though he was their blood and flesh. Tommy had expected the car to sell for a few $100,000. He didn't care about the money, only that he'd fulfilled his dad's last wish. But as he drove into the private London auction, he realized something. YouTube's Samspace81 all eyes were on Tommy as soon as his car roared up the driveway. Princes, business moguls, politicians, and celebrities stared at him. His life was about to change. The bid for Tommy's car began at $1 million, an amount that left him speechless. By the end, it sold for over $5 million, double the amount his brothers got in their dad's will. Tommy couldn't believe it. He'd always trusted in his dad's judgment and felt guilty that he'd been mad before. Perhaps his dad wanted him to know the value of hard work. If that was the case, then this was a lesson Tommy would never forget. That's the end of this video. Thank you for watching. As always, if you like this video, please like, comment, or subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.